Hello, I am Gus Firth, a managing consultant here at Source Technology, and you're listening to Source Talks, the Tech Lab. This is episode 3. Today I'm joined by Akos. Akos is the VP of Technology Habyt, which is a real estate company in Berlin. They develop co-living spaces across more than 50 cities worldwide. They've recently merged with Common, which is the largest community-driven residential operator in the US. Their plan is to sort of further drive that sort of real estate market forward. Habyt in general, they offer spaces which are beautifully designed, community driven, and supported by the tech platform, which the lovely Akos is responsible for. In his free time, Akos is also an author, a blogger, occasionally a conference speaker as well, and today he'll be a lovely podcast speaker. So yeah, welcome to the episode. Really hope you enjoy the content. If you are, it would be great if you could support and share and comment and engage with the material that we post. We post some clips on LinkedIn. So yeah, it'd be great to have that support. Really appreciate it, and really excited to get into this episode today. How are you doing, Akos? Good afternoon.
Hey Gus, thanks for the lovely introduction. I'm doing great today, and I'm very excited to be here and to have a little chat about the business, about myself, and about how things are going.
Fantastic. First of all, as I always do with our guests, it would be great to jump into your sort of story so far. I always ask the same intro question. So can you give us a little bit of a story or a little bit about your journey sort of into the tech industry, from the moment sort of software captured your heart to where we are today?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how back I should be going, but my software story is not really the 10x engineer story that you normally hear from many leaders, who started programming in BASIC, 150 years ago, and worked as a freelancer from the age of 5, writing code for various companies and building websites. I actually wanted to do very theoretical stuff when I started looking into software in high school, and I studied the first line of code that I wrote was at university. Actually, I didn't do anything that's related to software engineering or building systems or anything like this before that. And shortly I wrote my first line of code, I also started working in the business, because we had some stuff back in the day after the housing market collapse in 2006 in my family. So I quickly started to hustle with all of the things that I could do, and one of this was code. And I studied for 5 years at the University of Budapest to get my master's degree in computer science. I wanted to do a PhD as well, but my thesis proposal got rejected. So I landed in the industry in the end. I started off my work relationships at consultancies, essentially. So I was writing various systems, business process management stuff, invoicing, stuff that governments like to buy. Essentially, relatively boring projects, but for a 20-year-old, it was plenty good at that time. And I really started getting into software and working in teams and building massive systems at my alma mater, which is Prezi. I worked for Prezi in 2 sections for about 7 years in total. I started off there as junior full stack developer. I worked primarily with Python at that point, and then I became a technical lead there. I was coaching senior engineers in the end on how to make good decisions. And during my second tenure, which already happened here in Germany, I'm originally from Hungary, Budapest. So during my second tenure, I was also leading teams, managing their work, making sure that they're working on the most important things, coaching the leads of the teams to make sure that things are getting done the right way. That is good for both the team, the company, and the customer, of course. And recently, about 2 years ago, I joined Habyt as the VP of Technology. Thank you for the great intro about Habyt as well, Gus. I think you summarized really well what we are doing. Habyt is a the one thing I would like to add is Habyt is a really quickly growing company. Like, as you mentioned, the most recent company who joined Habyt in this journey was Common. Before that, Habyt also worked to merge with a lot of other companies as well, such as Quarters, which was also a large co-living operator back in the day, or Homefully, a very German-oriented co-living operator that we worked together with, and then we merged. Last year, Hamlet, which was one of the biggest co-living operators in Asia that we merged together with and continued our operations. My job here is very simple as of today, at least it's simple to explain. Everything that is technology related goes through my department, essentially. Starting from hardware related things or on what our colleagues are working on, licenses that we need to provision them with the various tools that they have, engineering related topics on the hard things that we are building in-house, and product design related topics as well are landing in my department. I've been here for almost 2 years now. I joined 2021 September. And since then, our team has gone through a very big growth as well. We are 7 times more people now compared to where we started. So now we are a department of over 20 people, multiple cross-functional teams working together to solve different goals for the business and the customer.
Amazing, thank you very much for that sort of description of your journey. Out of interest, when you said you wanted to do a PhD, what was your thesis proposal?
So this was a very long time ago. Well, very long is maybe relative, but I finished my university studies in 2013, I think, if I remember correctly. And at that time, smartphones were not were a thing already, but we didn't have these powerhouse machines that we have today, computers that are smarter than the stuff that we helped to send people to the moon with and stuff like this. So my thesis topic was helping people who have relatives with hearing problems to learn sign language, essentially. So the topic was, how could we utilize hardware, software, machine learning, and all of these topics at that time to build like a real-time translation app of sign language. Why it got rejected? The department at that point had bigger priorities. They were working together with different healthcare providers in digital imagery and detecting various anomalies on CT scans and areas like this. I actually did do a PhD for about half a year where I also explored this domain a little bit. But ultimately, I didn't really find that it's like a great fit, neither for me, and because it was not a good fit for me, like it was definitely not a good fit for the department either.
That makes sense. I mean, maybe it could make a brilliant idea for maybe a next startup or something similar, right? I think.
Yes, maybe, exactly. I mean, with today's tech, with all of the stuff that's out there today, building something like this is probably an easier thing than it would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Just going back to Habyt as well. Obviously, you guys have grown in a very short number of time. What made you join Habyt in the first place? You've obviously been like at HelloFresh for a short stint, Prezi, as you mentioned as well for several years. What made you join Habyt?
It's a very good question, Gus. Thank you. So on my end, there were many factors, really. Part of it's personal stuff, of course, that's over there, where my life's at and things like this. But ultimately, I found it very exciting at that point to join a company which is growing very quickly. I got very, very excited about the leaders of the company. Luca Bovone, our CEO, inspired me particularly when I was interviewing for this position. What really, really drove me here is that I felt that technology at Habyt is not the primary product that we want to that Habyt wants to sell. So Habyt is a housing provider, right? So our core product and the core center of the business and the core customer experience is always going to be the room, the apartment, the location, that these people are staying at. And this got me very excited because to me, what this means is that the business does not solely rely on tech. And for me, that is a very inspiring thing because it makes me feel that there's more collaboration between the company to make things work. If tech makes mistakes, then there's less pressure on tech, for example, in that case. And it's a very exciting and noble domain for me as well to work in because there are a lot of startups out there today that solve very niche problems or customer needs that are very high up the Maslow pyramid and stuff like this. And at Habyt, we're really trying to solve a real customer issue, which is to provide housing for people essentially anywhere and anyone on the planet.
That's something that's really big in Berlin, right? Because there's not like in London, for example, here, you're paying like through the roof to rent a property, like in a lot of big cities. But a lot of people will always look to buy and things, whereas in Berlin, it's very much the habit, right? To rent a property. Would it have it start in Berlin? Is this where it was sort of fostered first?
Yeah. So Habyt started, I think 6 years ago now in Berlin. This is where Luca and a couple of other folks started with literally one apartment, essentially. And since then, we've grown to 6,000 rooms now in Europe, hundreds of rooms in Asia, thousands of rooms that we have in the United States that we are managing. You mentioned over 50 cities, we are in over a dozen countries as well. And yeah, so we started from Berlin, and I moved to Berlin about 5 years ago as well. And I think everyone has this the same experience when they try to move to like a bigger city. It's quite difficult to find a place to live in. In Berlin, this is an especially complex and very big issue over here. Even if you find a place, the landlords try to negotiate with you, for example, not giving you registration papers to the city, and then it's harder for you to find work and to get registered for health insurance. And this is our goal, essentially, right? To make this really, really easy for people to do.
Like one of the main problems as well right now is like obviously like landlords, right? Especially in some of my friends who are looking for apartments to rent, they're in like almost these like bidding wars with people where it's not like even a set price, right? So like there's hardly any jurisdiction on this whole, one of the most important like needs for a human, right? Which is having a roof over your head. And it's just crazy how you can get these things can be exploited.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're aiming for, to give a good experience for people. We have a huge range of people who want to live in a Habyt flat. We have people who stay with us for years. We have people who just come and live with us for a couple of months until they find like a more suitable place for themselves in the city. But ultimately, this is our goal, to make moving from one place to another very easy for a person.
Yeah, nice. And just speaking on that and just some of the challenges, literally, what are some of the biggest challenges, maybe not on the sort of renting and functional side, but maybe on the technical side that you're facing at the moment? And were you aware of any of these before you joined?
Yeah, it's a very, very funny topic actually. So Habyt is not a tech company, right? As we mentioned, we are a tech supported company or a tech assisted company. And I remember that my very first interview was with the chief customer officer, Eduardo. And We are quite a young bunch here at Habyt, so and we don't like to dance around the bushes or beat around the bushes. So Edo, in his second sentence, basically told me that tech is, pretty challenging at the company at the moment. There's a lot of legacy. There's a lot of customization that had happened by external parties. Uh, there's very little automation in the systems, and Edo was very open about all of these challenges that Habyt was facing, and this is partly what got me very excited. And with I came in, I tried to take the helm in this domain, and basically since then, we started working through this massive backlog of things that existed at that point in the company. One of our biggest tech debts and one of our big challenges today is that our core data sets today live in a sales system essentially, instead of a proprietary database. This is something that we are working with the engineers inside of the department to figure out how we can elevate this data into a place which is a much more workable state instead of where it lives today.
And then you're on that, but kind of being a non-tech first company or like a non-SaaS company, I guess you could say. What would be the best way to say it? What comes first then to Habyt? Is it the marketing, like the sales side of things? Is it like the customer experience? Like, what comes first?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Right now, I would say that what's very important for us is two things. First is making sure that our customers get treated well. We have a lot of projects that we are constantly working on to make sure that customers get the treat that they deserve. Meaning not just that, we collect the money automatically or collect your rent automatically and guide you through your contract signature and stuff like this, but also, making sure that people get their deposits back in time, making sure that whenever they have physical issues, for example, in their flat, maybe there's flooding happening or a chair broke by accident or something like this, that our team is there for them to help with the issues that they're experiencing. There's a lot of nuances here, right? Because we cannot fix a toilet by writing an algorithm, but what we can help with is for the algorithm to put this information in front of the right person in the system so they can help immediately.
Yeah, right. And from a tech point of view, like if you're noticing very specific trends of things that keep going wrong, you can pick up on them easier, things like this. That's interesting. Before we move on to the main section, because we're already sort of drifting into it anyway, like I love to really ask this question about sort of the values that you've sort of picked up over the last few years, whether it be from, like I said, Prezi initially when you joined, from HelloFresh when going back to Prezi, or just from Habyt in general. What are some of the key values that you've sort of kept as a core to how you sort of live?
It's a really amazing question. Thank you so much. So one of the most important things for me is people. I like to work with people who communicate in a straight way. Okay, so if something is a no, then it should not be a maybe, and it should definitely not be a yes. This is, and it's part of my journey as well. For example, as I grew into this position that I'm in right now, I also noticed that, people can say things that that they want me to hear in certain ways. For example, when I'm interviewing people, one of my favorite questions is, what was your biggest mistake? that you can remember in your career so far? And the way I like to ask this question is I also like to explain my biggest mistake that I've made in my career so far, or one of my biggest mistakes, to make sure that people are comfortable to say their things. And yeah, if I feel like that, so everyone makes mistakes in their work. There's no such thing as, a perfect engineer or a perfect person who always did everything great. And, yeah, I worked in the industry for 20 years and I've never messed up, business function, or I've always written tests for everything, or I never misunderstood a request of a stakeholder. So for me, this topic is very, very important, that we need to be able to talk to each other very, very openly and very, very clearly. So I would say that this is number one for me. Number two is respect towards each other. One of my pet peeves is when I hear different information about different people from different places, and that really causes like a headache for me, and that is really not nice when I feel like that people are not respectful towards each other and try to go around things. So for me, it's absolutely crucial that when I'm working and whoever I'm working with, like, they are treated with absolute respect, even if they really don't understand, let's say, anything about technology or how the business works or how we can do implementation and stuff like this. They need to be treated with utmost respect, and we need to make sure that everything is clear, good, and in like human manner with regards to communication. And maybe to round it down, let's say, let's add maybe a third thing here as well. Generally, I like to work with people who I can have a good conversation with. That's very important for me. That especially, Habyt is a remote first company. But in general, in today's remote world, just like we are having this conversation now via the internet, and not, in place, sitting in front of each other, sipping coffee or beer at a recording studio, it's absolutely critical that people should vibe with each other quite nicely. And because maybe, some people might treat a company as just a job for them, and I respect that completely. But some people really, build long-lasting, or like to build long-lasting relationships during their work. And I want to give this opportunity to everyone. And I just want to make sure that the people who I work with are not just respectful, but also easy people to talk to and hang out with.
Amazing. I mean, just there, you've made me really want to open a recording studio in Berlin with a few beers. And that sounds a lot nicer.
Idea, Gus.
It sounds a lot nicer than standing in my 30-degree room in London. That's great. So, respect, communication, like these are some really good values, and it's nice to hear that. In terms of the sort of core discussion today, you've obviously mentioned, you're a tech leader, you work in a non-SaaS company. I really want to dive in how you really deliver features consistently with, a growing organization, maybe some junior engineers as well across, like you said, some cross-functional teams, and how you really keep it sort of lean and clean, I guess you could say, as the department grows. So from that sort of non-SaaS perspective, Akos, can you share some insights? Like, what are some of the key strategies and approaches that you tend to consider when you're in a company? It's not maybe technology focused. It's more of like a supporting role you're playing. What sort of strategies and approaches do you normally take?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Gus. So maybe I can talk about one of my first learnings when I joined Habyt, because traditionally, you mentioned that I worked a little bit at HelloFresh, I think for a year, a lot at Prezi, a lot for consultancies and stuff like this. And most of my roles here, though, were, very hardcore, tech focused, building features for customers essentially at the very end. And when I joined the Habit, one of my big learnings was that non-SaaS companies, as you mentioned, or non-tech centralized companies, have a lot of internal needs. That's one of my big learnings from the very beginning of my tenure here. So this basically means that Habit, as a company, we're not just a website who puts out these labels and then you make booking and then you move in. There's a lot of things happening in the background to make sure that everything looks the way, acts the way, and behaves the way that is going to be good for our customers. So we have, for example, a huge property management team, a team whose sole responsibility is to make sure that our buildings, the buildings that we are managing, the buildings that we are renting out, they are good quality. Everything is clean there when someone moves in. There are no broken toilets. And everything runs well, perfectly. This team, for example, they have needs, right? They need to have systems where they are storing their data, and they need to have automations to make sure that when something happens in one of the buildings, people get notified. They need advice on how they could do things better technologically. They need integrations with external partners that they're working with. Let's say I mentioned cleaning. We don't clean everything by ourselves. We are working with partners in that domain to get everything cleaned. So all of these things pile up to huge amounts of internal requirements that help the company to stay lean as well. Because of course whenever a problem like this pops up, whenever a tech question pops up, usually you can hire people to do that work that normally an algorithm would do. But if you want to build a company that is efficient, that can grow, that can really serve customers in a fast and good way, then you really need to invest into these internal tools. You really need to make sure that the operations teams are very happy, that they can work very efficiently, and that they're well supported. This is something I did not experience at SaaS companies where, tech is the center of everything, essentially. And this is the first time I've experienced this, and it was a very strong learning experience for me. And yeah, since then, one of the core decisions that came out of this, Gus, is that today we have 2 cross-functional teams internally. One of them are focused on helping out tenants and their experience, and the other one is focused solely on internal efficiency, helping our back office teams to work, the best that they can do.
Thanks for answering that and in so much detail. I guess it's interesting how where you're in a non-SaaS company and it's so important for that sort of like tech hub, as it were. It almost kind of translates into like an operational perspective, like what you're doing anyway, like in terms of storing data, connecting it like APIs like you would to maybe external providers, like automations and alerts, like it all sort of translates into like a technical company anyway, you know what I mean? So it's you're almost like the backbone of that. How you said, I think your team was 20 people. Is that like 10% of the whole company that's dealing with all this?
Let me think. It's about 5%, I think, if we account the entire global company, I would say.
And you said one was focused on the tenant experience, one was focused on more of the internal efficiencies, like we mentioned, the partners and the alerts and the different, all these requirements that are piling up. From the technical side of things, what are the sort of principles or best practices you sort of try to maintain in your time at Habit?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm going to answer with a very easy, it depends. So but with a bit more context. So for example, when I joined Habyt, the team was incredibly small. We had two administrators for internal systems, and we had one person who was responsible for IT related things. And this was the entire team. So at this point, I was very much focused on figuring out what sort of tech needs Habyt actually has, right? Because it's not trivial to come in and just understand immediately, okay, so what sort of teams I want to build here, how many people will I need short term, mid-term, and long term to support the needs of the company. Getting to know people to understand what the core of their issues are, and not I need a button level comments and things like this. So in the beginning, it was very, very much exploration and getting some basics, like basic infrastructural components down. And then, as time passed, I started hiring people. I hired two of my great ex-colleagues, Robert and Peter, who joined me in this journey as senior technical people, engineers, and they really helped me and the company to speed up, development principles and to fix, underlying core issues with the existing system, for example. And then as we were growing, we started introducing new roles. We started introducing product management roles with Hamlet joining forces with Habyt. Two great product managers, Jeremy and Kevin, they joined and they started helping us organize work a little bit more, manage stakeholders more efficiently, take off workload from the technical people in the department to do more focused work essentially. Then we learned that we need more engineers, right? We always need more engineers, basically every company probably. So we continued hiring engineers. And as this department grew, we also saw that, for example, we needed data, like more democratized access to data instead of the basic reporting tools that were available to people at that point. So it's very much, it's very much an organic thing that I try to plan ahead with the team to understand what are the needs going to be in the future. As we are growing, some challenges we leave behind because we fix them, but in a growing organization, there's always new challenges that are popping up that are either how do we work together, how do we figure out what are the most important things in the company to work on, how do we grow the team, what type of people do we need to run more efficiently. So yeah, I would say that this is how it's going right now. I hope I answered your question. Maybe I got a little bit lost in the meantime, Gus.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm sure we can dive into a lot more questions and cover it. But yeah, it makes sense, right? Like out of interest, because I as a recruiter, I love a bit of hiring. What was maybe like the role that you found the hardest to hire for when you started and you're growing it, and maybe what was the role that made like the most impact as like a non-SaaS company, like the biggest impact to the tech landscape and how that connected and integrated to the larger company?
It's a very sensitive question because I don't want to insult anyone, right, Gus? All the roles were very important, right? But in full honesty, this is really the answer. When you are bootstrapping, a tech department from ground up, you really need to always focus on the next most important thing that we need to address. In the beginning, as I mentioned, I was hiring engineers. There was just so much code and technical stuff that had to be done essentially to take Habyt from A to B or A to C or somewhere later in the alphabet essentially, that we really just needed people with fingers who are experienced in building systems. So at that point, Robert and Holtz, they had huge impact on the company when they joined, because They were able to fix payment systems. They were able to automate a bunch of things. They were able to put down the first building blocks of our SEO strategy and stuff like this. So at that point, that was the biggest impact. Recently, we've had new joiners in the department. Frank joined us a couple of months ago on the data front. Frank has now huge impact on the company. He is helping fix our metrics. He's helping, fix our data structures in the background. He's helping us build a data warehouse to make data more democratized. We've had Esther and Flavia join. Flavia on design, Esther on user experience. Right now, we felt the need that, although we know that what the world expects from a company who is doing rentals or who has listing pages, for example, all of us have these apps, right? All of us have Immo Scout in Germany installed on their phone, or we visit the website and we scroll for hours and hours and hours to find the perfect flat for ourselves. But we also know that Habyt is not this, and we had this feeling that that Habyt is not just this. So that's why, Esther and Flavia came in and they started helping us sorting out, how we can really engage the customers with the exact things that we want to offer to them. So I would say that all of the roles that came in were super important. Which one was the most difficult to hire for? I think my longest role to hire for was a designer, I think. But we got very, very lucky with Flavia, who is like a true talent, and she's helping us out a lot with fast, precise, and beautiful designs that she's giving to the team.
Amazing. I mean, I love this. Is sort of like the beauty of having a small team as well. Is like I asked the question like, what was your most favorite hire, or like the what fit in the most, and you mentioned every single person. So it's very good. I like that sort of collaboration is great, and it's obviously representative of your sort of values as a leader as well. When you talk about like these integrations with other companies, I mean, you mentioned lots like from Asia and also from Germany as well. How hard is it when you're integrating like these different systems that they have? This could be a whole other podcast I feel itself, but when you're not that tech focused at the start, and then you're integrating another system, what's the challenges there?
Oh yeah, it could be an entire different episode, I think. But I will try to give like a summary of how we work. It's always difficult. There's no easy merger. There's no easy integration of technical systems of companies. Challenges can come from various areas. Some stuff that you really don't expect to pop up. Sometimes it's very simple things. Okay, data structure looks different here than there, right? Then we need to figure out how to shape the external company's data in a way so we can put it easily into the system. Normally, technical issues are quite easy with integrations in reality. Some stuff pops up with the product, for example. So, for example, how leads are being acquired in Asia are very, very different than how we are acquiring leads in Europe, right? So the product needs to be slightly different in our Asian listing pages in the future compared to how we've been running the business so far globally. And sometimes we encounter very complex issues like cultural things. For example, in Italy, people don't trust credit cards yet that much. So, it's much harder for us to convince people to give us card information so we can collect their rent automatically than, for example, in Germany, where now online credit card payments are more accepted, let's say, than 5 years ago when I came here and I couldn't pay with a card anywhere in the city. So all of these integrations are very challenging. Some of them are more challenging than others because of size, for example, or geographical distance or anything like this. But overall, all of them are a good challenge for the team, because we don't just learn from it's not a routine task. Essentially, it's not something that we click 2 buttons and everything is done. We need to dig deep. We need to understand the business that has been running there. We need to understand how the tenants are there, how the teams are working there, and then help them adapt to the systems that we can provide to them. So it's always a challenge, but I would say that it's always like a very strong, like star sticker on everyone's CV when they go through one of these integrations.
Yeah. And does it ever happen where when you integrate with a company or you obtain a company or acquire or whatever it might be, the situation, where that company's actually brought like significant like operational improvements or anything like this? Is that the case, or is it always just a big headache?
So this is one of the things that we do, right, during these integrations, and I'm very scrutinous with the team, with the tech team about this, that if there is a process or a tool or code even that would make the global company stronger, then there is no ego fight here. We're going to go with that, and that's it. So there is always a big review process on our end. What can we use that is going to make the global Habyt a stronger unit together? What are the learnings that we can lift over from these companies that are smarter than us? And ultimately, if someone has better tech than us, I'm okay with using their stuff rather than ours at this point. It's a very interesting topic though, because this is a very interesting industry when it comes to tech. So I had the privilege to look into a lot of code bases to understand, how a lot of companies that Habyt integrated with build their tech, for example. And I've seen 2 extremes so far, which is, there is absolutely no tech. We are using some sort of website or a spreadsheet to track all of our stuff, and it kind of works, so that's it. Or the other side, which is, we've invested incredible amount of money and time into building something very, very custom that only works for us. And because of that, these companies sometimes fail because they're too tech focused, but their primary product is not technology in reality. So this is what I'm trying to navigate here, Gus, right? So how can we stay in the middle of this spectrum, right? How can we be not too over-engineered? How can we not bloat our technology team to a size where it's completely pointless because the company and the business does not need it? But how can we stay sane without going too little on technology, basically?
Based on your experience with these sort of maybe some like being a part of a non-tech focused company, is there any like trends or technologies at the moment in the market that where actually you're at an advantage as a non-tech company?
As a non-tech company, I'm not sure, but I think that so when I joined the Habyt, I came from very tech-heavy companies, right? So HelloFresh, hundreds of engineers working there, building massive infrastructure, building highly scalable systems, and being on the market for a decade at that point. Coming from Prezi, very, very similar situation, right? Over 100 people in the engineering department, lots of legacy, massive systems, gigantic infrastructure, and stuff like this. And I came to Habyt, and I came from very engineering headspace at that point. And I was like, oh my God, we're missing so many things, right? We don't have infrastructure, we don't have anything. Our website is just running from this static page hosting. And I was like, okay, so what do we need to do? And in the first few weeks, I really reverted to this engineering mindset. Oh, we need Kubernetes. Oh, should I set up Kubernetes? Is a server enough for us? but then what sort of backends we should be using, what sort of code, programming language should I use, because what I choose now is probably going to be at the company for many years to come as well. I got into this downward spiral, because upward spirals, as we know, don't really exist. So I got into this downward spiral, and then at some point I was like, okay, just stop everything and just go what you do best. Go on Google and search how people build things today. Like if I had to build like a startup, a tech startup from ground zero, what would I do? And I was in a very lucky position with Habyt with this, because I inherited and the tech department inherited very little legacy, only this sales system that was there and running. And so I had carte blanche over here. So I started exploring newer tools on full stack development. I looked into various TypeScript and JavaScript based tools, because I found that TypeScript is programming language that is safe to use. It scales really well to many platforms. Generally, relatively easy to hire TypeScript talent as well from the market. And I also spoke a good amount of TypeScript at that time, at least, to get started with some sort of features. So I did a lot of exploration on the market at that point. I checked out simple Express applications at that point. I checked out Astro, and ultimately where my choice fell was Next.js and the hosting platform Vercel in the end. Why did I choose this? Might be your next question, Gus. How this little research went in the end. One thing that I started calculating very early at Habyt was, how much can we spend on technology? How much we had to get to value very quickly, essentially, because the rest of the company is growing like this, right? Tech cannot grow like this in this case. We need to come up with ways on how we can catch up with the growth of the rest of the company. Otherwise, we're just going to be always overwhelmed with work. And this is when I made one of the first decisions that I'm still very happy about, which is not to have DevOps essentially at the company. I didn't want us to host servers that we want to build backends on. I didn't feel like that we particularly need like complex front-end deployment systems or anything like this. I was really looking for solutions which could take care of all of this for us. And that was when I stumbled upon Vercel and Next.js, this little marriage made in heaven. And I started looking into it, and I built the first prototype of the Habyt website that you see today on habyt.com. And essentially, after a couple of weeks of coding in that framework, on that infrastructure with TypeScript, I decided to double down and to just go for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like, it's one of the markets that I'm personally involved with, like Next.js, Node, React, because it is adopted by a lot of like these startups, first of all, but also by like bigger companies who are doing like maybe a smaller integration or newer, quicker projects, right? So yeah. In terms of, Next.js as a framework for React, maybe I can express some of my own knowledge here, or maybe I'll look like an idiot, but it's supported.
No, I love it. Please shine, Gus.
It's supported by Vercel, right? So like they provide like a deployment pipeline. This is one of the reasons you choose it, right? In terms of like fast deployment, it allows you to like build your API like into your product, right? And it's just it seems like more convenient. Is that something you'll stick with for the rest of time as Habyt grows, you think?
So I don't make these decisions anymore, luckily. It's the engineers who are making these calls now at Habyt. But what I can say today is that we are very, very happy with Vercel as not just a platform, but also as a partner. Like it's fantastic to work with them. We are utilizing most of their feature set that they have. So, I'm not just talking about the deployment pipeline that they have. We are using their custom caching technologies. We are using their key value store. We are using a bunch of hosting options that they have. So we are really, using their platform for a lot of things. And yeah, so I see us working together with Vercel for quite a time. If the engineering team makes a different call for whatever reason, then they can be held accountable for that decision in the future.
Little warning there to the techies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about this, like deployment and different pipelines and delivering features on a whole. When we first spoke, I think you had like a team of 3. Now it's like a team of 7. When you're delivering like a couple of features a week with a development team, with certain practices that you've put in terms of like coding techniques or methodologies or automation tools, like what's helped your team achieve this productivity and maintain that sort of code quality that you obviously look for?
Yeah, thanks. Again, a great question. And so I mentioned that I used to work together with Robert and Peter in the past, and we really embraced a lot of these. I wouldn't call it modern, but like best engineering practices, essentially. Like when we started working together here at Habyt, we quickly realized that and after the COVID experience as well previously, we really realized that we need to build a team here of people, as I mentioned in the beginning, right, who can collaborate really well. Because one of the big fears of remote working that I always have is that a person in the department just gets lost, right? Like not necessarily disappearing because they don't want to work or anything like this, but disappearing because they're scared to ask questions. They're scared to jump into, a huddle on Slack and discuss, maybe a coding problem. And this is a sort of culture that we're really, really pushing and encouraging in the tech department, that just because the person is 1,000 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers or 5,000 kilometers from you, it doesn't mean that interaction needs to be limited with them. So I'm really happy today that when I'm on Slack and I'm scrolling, I see the engineers being in huddles, working together, brainstorming, truly pair programming remotely to help each other succeed in each other's tasks. There are a couple of processes as well that we've integrated to reinforce this. One of the first things that we've done is introduce code reviews, mandatory code reviews in the system. We can say that it's like a compliance thing as well, but within the team, we truly believe that we are shipping better software because another set of eyes looks at it at least once. Of course, we have a couple of Vercel is a huge help when it comes to tooling because, as I said, we have 0 DevOps in the company, and engineers very, very rarely need to touch anything that is remotely DevOps related. We do have a couple of things though. So we have automated testing pipelines set up. Part of them run on Vercel, part of them run with GitHub Actions that we found just very easy to get started with and to start working with. It's very easy to maintain as well for us. So instead of running a Jenkins cluster with Gherkin jobs written there that are thousands of lines long, we have GitHub Actions, which are YAML files and are like 60 lines long. Anyone who reads it will understand immediately what is happening over there. So overall, we're really focused on okay, what's important for us to deliver better experiences for the customers. And in the beginning, for example, tests were not very important. When it was only a couple of engineers working on the same code base, everyone kind of had everything in their head, and it was completely fine. Now that we have more people, more interactions, more clashes in the code, more synchronization required for delivery. Now we start I think last August we started introducing automated tests, end-to-end tests, all sort of tools that protect us from making mistakes when we're doing deployments. Overall, my primary principle here is that there needs to be a balance. Since we are a small team, the expectations are high from us, and the tooling that we have is really good. So we need to figure out how we can balance between going really hard and just blasting out features constantly and potentially breaking things, versus going really slow and making sure that every pixel and line of code and backend function is absolutely perfect with a lot of tests and stuff like this. Maybe we will get to that point as well. It's hard to say today. Right now, the goal is that we're finding this right balance of what to check when, so we can stay as lean as we can.
Nice. And yeah, that's some great sort of techniques there that you're putting in place, and also like the sort of methodologies you're following to maintain that sort of productivity and quality of the code. What about like a further kind of strategy, or when we're talking about lean processes, a company that is very much needs to ensure that it has scalability as well. So on the sides of maybe like microservices and containerization, maybe even serverless approaches, what sort of strategies do you have there from a technical standpoint?
So very good question again. Thanks. So I come from microservice background. Okay, I even wrote my book about microservices. And today I wouldn't say I'm anti-microservice, but I rather think that a lot of companies just don't need it. Essentially, I've seen a lot of how do you say this, like bad examples of microservice implementation. If you start too early with this in your company's life cycle, then your developers are not going to be efficient whatsoever. Value is not going to be produced, and tech becomes just a money drain instead of something that really moves the company forward. So microservices can be a very, very useful tool for very big tech companies who are willing to take the operational hit in engineering to build safer and more robust systems. I would say that this might start when everyone has different heuristics for this on when you should introduce microservices. I disagree that so you need to start with microservices, for example. I think that's not the approach that anyone should take. And if anyone takes away anything from this little episode, then this should be one of them. Don't start with microservices, because you might not ever need it in reality. So we personally, we have a monolithic Next.js application, and the fact that we are hosting it on Vercel, it gives us the serverless opportunities that we have with their platform. It's not, why is it very good? It's because our serverless functions are deployed across the planet. So basically, load time for a page is the same in Singapore as it is in Frankfurt, as it is in California, which is insane if you ask me about this. So it's very good from this point of view. On the other point of view, serverless tech can be limiting in reality. So with serverless, for example, it's much harder to build real-time applications, right? It's much harder to build a chatbot or like a chat application. If someone really wants to build one internally, pro tip, just go and buy one instead. It's much easier and faster, and no one will get hurt in that process. But yeah, if you need to build some real-time type of application, then with serverless you probably are not going to be able to do it. So you need to pivot to a different solution, maybe host a server on AWS or whatever hosting provider you need. So strategically, if you are a technology leader and or if you are the first person at the company tasked to build something out of very little or close to nothing, really, over engineering in the beginning can cause a huge hit for the company. And I would rather recommend to start very lean with tools that save you time, just saves you time essentially from a lot of manual work and manual processes and putting together stuff, and get down to customer value immediately. There are fantastic stacks today that you can use for this. One of the ones that I use for personal projects, for example, is the T3 stack that is getting more and more popularity on the internet. I mean, if you are on tech Twitter, then definitely you've heard about this. But these modern tech stacks and starter kits and templates, they really get you from to a point of value insanely quickly. And this is going to help you with your conversations in your conversations with your stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I was just looking up T3 stacks. Okay, so the core piece is Next.js, TypeScript, Tailwind. Okay, interesting. I imagine this is like something that you prioritize like when you first joined as well, right? Like, how can we do the best for the customer and save the most time? So that makes sense. And yeah, with microservices, I've always thought of it, or like I've been told to think of it like the sort of like a hospital, right? You only need microservices when you really need it, right? When you've got a broken leg or something. When you go to the hospital as well, it's very confusing. It's very elaborate. There's departments everywhere, and it's not for a small company to be getting involved with. That makes sense. When we are talking about like prioritizing features, like what to work on next, what are the factors that pop up in your mind? Like, okay, we're going to work on this rather than this, even though maybe another unit might be more critical.
Yeah. So this is a very challenging question, but it's also a very interesting one, Gus, because if you're working in a very quickly growing non-SaaS company, everyone will need tax help. So I'm not just talking about the previously mentioned operations teams, HR or the people team also needs tax help, marketing needs tech help, everyone needs tech help, essentially. And one of the core things is that in very fast growing companies, if tech is not taking care of tech, sounds weird, but this is what I want to say. So if tech lets go of too much technology at the company, then a lot of things could pivot into areas that are going to be very hard to control in the future and to tame. So prioritization is always a difficult question for us because of this, because as I said, everyone needs help. So we need to be very smart in, where we invest our time, essentially. We have discussions with one stakeholder and then another stakeholder says something completely different. So one of the things that we're doing is the product managers in the team, they are responsible for figuring out what we need to work on. That is first and foremost their responsibility in the department. So just recently, as I said, we are growing and we are learning a lot of things as we are go. So just recently we introduced, for example, bridge meetings with the upper management team, where we are getting the leadership of the tech department and the upper management team closer to each other, so they can have candid conversations, about priorities at the company. We also help them understand their real problems in these conversations, right? Because maybe it's not a technical issue in the end. Maybe it's something that can be solved by process. Maybe it's something that can be solved by organizing the data that they're working with differently. And so for us right now, and this is Habyt as a company, input from upper management is very important, because we're growing so quickly, because we are our company grew like, I don't know, 20-30x in the past 2 years. We need like a war crew on top, or like these lieutenants or commanders of the brigade, to give us clear instructions on what the priorities are, so we can also talk to people, the rest of the people in the company, and explain to them, how their needs are fitting the big picture of Habyt from a technology point of view. Prioritization is always tricky, of course. We also need a lot of help to make sure that we are working on the right things, even after all of these discussions with our leadership team. We usually ask for more data and more context in this case. For example, if we want to run like a bigger project that collides with another one, we ask for business cases. How is this project going to contribute to the key metrics that we discussed that we want to achieve this year or next year or whatnot? And if the business cases don't come, or if they are not fully put together or anything like this, then we challenge them to understand if this is really the most important thing to work on.
It's interesting you mentioned these like sort of upper management or upper like echelon meetings. It's not so dissimilar to like an all hands meeting maybe, where that you might have done at the Prezi or HelloFresh, for example.
Yeah.
What's the kind of technical bottlenecks that's the hardest to like translate to maybe a more operational person? Like, what's the hardest to really get across there and say like, hey, we can't do this because of
Yeah, I think one of the things that we could get really better at, that we're really working on with my staff, so like the leadership of the department, is figuring out how we can be more predictable. This is something that one of the product managers that I used to work with at the previous company always told me, that I don't need you to be fast, I need you to be predictable. But in some cases, you also need to be fast. That is just the situation. But predictability is something that I value very, very highly in the industry. And not necessarily talking about, to the hour type of estimations and stuff like this over here, but generally, understanding how long a certain project task might take is something that I think that we should and can get better at, because this is, for leaders of the company, this is a very important thing to know. And if you are new to tech leadership, this might be new to you, but in reality, other people depend on your work most of the time. Like you're just not coding and managing teams into the ether, to get that stuff done without goals. Sometimes the work that you're doing has heavy implications if it's late, because let's say you're building a project for the support team, for example, and they were really accounting that, for example, you can reduce or increase the amount of tickets that a single person can handle per week from 100 to 200, for example. And if you are not able to deliver your project on time, then what could happen is the rest of the support team, because they were accounting for higher ticket volumes per person, they would need to handle the ticket volume, which will lead to like burnout, sadness, difficulty, and ultimately, worst customer satisfaction. So this is why I think that this is the area that we could improve in a lot, and that I would want us to improve in as well, is how to be more predictable towards the projects that we are working on. I think, I'm speaking for everyone over here in the industry. All of us could get a little better at this.
That's very interesting, like the sort of predictability, or I mean, maybe I could offer some advice back because you're the knowledge man. But maybe I'm just going to plug the second episode that we just did as well. If you go back and watch that, it's really interesting what he was talking about in terms of how he maps out dependencies in the team, and who's dependent on who, and then how then he then splits the teams on those dependencies, and the predictability, I guess, comes into this, right? So you then know how dependent everyone is on each other, and different things like this. So yeah, I definitely recommend going back, and he has a whole article where he sort of shows you how he would map out these dependencies and then how he would make decisions. So yeah, that would be a super interesting episode if you want to check out that. Phil Bennett at Kilo Health did a whole talk on that.
Awesome.
Really interesting. And what about very short term like customer demands? There must be some, very maybe like a high-end customer, something similar to this, where how do you balance like a long-term technical goal with, let me really do this really quickly, this is really important?
Yeah, very, very good question. This is something that we tackled around 6 months ago, actually. So yeah, when the tech team was very small, people just sent us messages on Slack. We threw it into Linear, our ticketing system. And then, whenever someone had time, they picked it up, they fixed it, and that was it. And, not nice and easy and simple. But as we were growing, as I mentioned, Gus, the expectations also start growing towards us, as they should naturally. And these very interesting problems started arising that, people were just overwhelmed with work all the time. And that's a very shitty problem to have, in my opinion, because in reality, work is kind of like a pipeline. Tasks are arriving, things need to get done. Some of them are more important than other things. Sometimes we need to do very quick fixes if we are having an outage, right? Sometimes customer gets stuck in their contract signature flows, and then we need to help them out with something. So what we did is we are using Notion for our internal documentation system, and we created a database on Notion that is accessible to everyone in the company. And if they have something that they need from us, that's where they need to go. And for the first couple of months, this was not the easiest thing to do because, people resisted on putting tickets on. Some people, just didn't get the memo and went back to their friends in the tech team to ask for help and stuff like this. But today, all of the requests to the tech team are arriving through this one funnel, and this funnel is primarily focused on small requests. Okay, so if someone comes in and tells us that we need to build like a mobile application for our landlords, then that's not going to be something that we're going to take into account here. Like that needs to go into a discussion of like bigger meeting. But for example, if someone finds a bug on the website, or has an issue with like some images that we're displaying, for example, on properties, or encountered a bug or need help with something IT related, they come to this one place, they describe their problem, and then the product team, they prioritize all of the tickets that are arriving here. Some of them we literally just send the people to the FAQ pages that we are curating internally for them to be able to do stuff by themselves, educate them a little bit. Sometimes we say that, this request is not really fitting into our goals right now, so we cannot do it for you, but, come back in a couple of months when our focus area is going to be this and that, and then it's going to fit better into our plans. And sometimes, we say, yeah, this is a big problem, or this is something that we can actually do right now and we need to do right now. And then, it gets into our ticketing system for the engineers, and then they start working on it. It's very interesting because I haven't worked with systems like this before anywhere. So this was the first time for me that we've introduced the ticketing system for the tech department. And I'm pleasantly surprised on how much it helped to keep the team focused, essentially. The amount of tickets that we have been receiving also is decreasing constantly, which means that we are prioritizing issues that are systematic and not one-off. And overall, all of the engineers and everyone in the teams are just way more focused on the important things, essentially.
Nice. That just jogged my memory from when we spoke a while ago when you mentioned Notion and you actually showed me how it was set up. I've actually been using Notion for like 3 months now, or 2 months with my team. And although it's not like an engineering perspective, like we can set each other tasks, we can go into subtasks, you have like you have a whole like databases in there. There's so many links. I would definitely recommend it for anyone to sort of deal with tasks to the most efficiency. Well, when you are talking about prioritizing these features, and when resources are limited, maybe there's only a few people, maybe someone's busy with tickets, and that anything can happen. How do you assess like the impact or the feasibility, I guess, of the different features? Like, do you have a certain criteria to prioritize the development? Like, how does it work internally for you guys?
Yeah, so for these smaller things or the bigger things, or both?
I guess the smaller things we were just sort of talking about, because both, I guess, because in some cases a smaller thing could then snowball, right, and become a much bigger thing.
Very much. So for the smaller things, it's up to the product managers essentially in the team. So I very, very rarely ask for something very specific over here, because I don't have full insight in the team's capacity. I don't fully know at any point, how many engineers are prepared to do what task and stuff like this. So I leave it solely to the product managers to make calls over there. It's also their stakeholders, right? So if something comes from sales department, for example, to get something fixed for them, or a small feature or something like this, the product manager who works with the sales team knows best how this fits into the vision that we have with the sales team, and how we want to help them and how we can help them in the future. And for bigger tasks and bigger areas, we primarily, rely on the council today. And what I mentioned, that people need to back up their projects with meat. Essentially, that's what's very important. That it's everything that we do has a purpose. If we cannot answer why we are doing something, then probably it's not worth it to work on it, essentially. So it's very, very important that all of these projects are backed up with very precise reasons on how we want to do it. Recently, for example, we changed customer relationship management systems. Okay, so beginning of this year, we ran a project, and we have since shifted away from our previous CRM to a brand new one. And when I was working together with the VP of Customer Experience on this project, she provided me with a lot of information on why this is important for her. The CRM at that point was not bad, tickets were coming in, support agents were able to work with tickets, they were able to find the data that they need, and they got their job done ultimately. But for the managers of the customer experience team, it was a very difficult task to figure out where to improve, because CRM that we used previously, it had very little insights on data, on how efficient the group is when handling tickets, how long it takes on average to reply to a customer and stuff like this. And the requirements were very, very clear. Like, we need to get a system where we can get this reporting as accurate as humanly possible, for example. And this gave a very good incentive to the tech team to actually support this project and to give, tooling to the customer experience team so they can provide a better customer experience in the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you got to have a good business case, right? If you're gonna explain someone who has a lot of different things on their plate, like what to do next. One of the recent projects that you mentioned when we last spoke, I think you were like onboarding different countries into their system. I think this enabled like multiple currencies to be involved. It unlocked a lot of potential. What was like the meat behind like that, for example? Like how did you prioritize this, or was it something that was quite urgent you had to do?
Yeah. We recently introduced the multiple currencies into the system, and part of this was that we were expanding outside of Europe, right? So it's very interesting because you can pay with euros even if you live in Singapore, but it's just much harder and much more error prone than if we just supported the currency that is local to that area. So this is one of the big projects that the back office team was working on, is to unlock this potential in the system to support multiple currencies. It's a platform-related project as well. In the beginning, Gus, I mentioned that for us, it's very important that the stuff that the tech team is working on, it has a global impact rather than, just a very regional niche impact, essentially. Of course, if we had a feature that we had to implement in order to, if we didn't have it, we couldn't sell in that country, for example, then of course we will have to do that regional feature. But overall, we had this business case that we had to have multiple currencies so we could integrate APAC countries easier into our systems. This is a very, very strong business case, obviously, because we don't just we are not just going to build a system which gonna support Hong Kong dollars and Singapore dollars, and then that's the end of the list. So our system now supports any currency on the planet. Essentially, we just need to flick it on and it works. And the idea behind this was exactly this, right? It's a global project. It has a strong business case to make the entire global organization's life easier in the future. So we prioritized it, and the team did a fantastic job with shipping it.
Fantastic. Thanks for going into that sort of detail. I mean, with all these big projects and even the small ones as well, and then on top of that, all the integrations and the different mergers, like the most recent one with Common that you mentioned, and all the smaller ones as well. How much sort of like tech debt does this create? Like, I've always wondered this. It's a big term that gets thrown around. We got loads of tech debt. Like, I sort of imagine it as like someone is just swimming in a bath full of problems. Like, how real is that to you guys as a smaller company?
I really like this metaphor of swimming in a bath full of problems. So it's a very good question, and there's a lot of pressure on the tech team at Habyt, because everyone wants a slice of this pie, essentially, and that's completely fine. So we need to perform quite well in order for the company to continue growing and to flourish. And basically what we have is an internal directive for this as of today. So my directive to the tech department is that we need to focus on quality rather than quantity. So what this means is that we need to make sure that, because there is so much stuff happening, because the expectations are so high, because the danger of slipping into very lousy tech and just really shipping anything at any moment and just pushing stuff out the risk of this is so incredibly high. The directive that we have is that we need to focus more on quality than quantity. Now, I'm not going to tell you, Gus, that we're absolutely perfect at this. That, as I mentioned, when it comes to testing, we test what's most important right now for the customer experience, right? And but this means this quality over quantity directive internally really helps us have great discussions about what's important and what's not important for us to do. So this, this sparks good discussions on pull requests, for example, about over-engineering or under-engineering certain features. This spawns discussions about, how can we, this is like the perfect time for us, or this is the perfect project to lift out something from the legacy system. So how can we integrate this task into this project so everybody wins out of it? So the internal directive is this. And by the way, whenever I'm interviewing people, I always ask them this question: how do you make sure that the software that you ship is high quality? Because this is what we want to focus on internally. Quality over quantity today. It has drawbacks as well, right? So there is a trade-off here, and whenever I think about software development, there is this little what is it called? A little slider, right? Like, do we ship more or do we ship better, essentially? And what I encourage everyone to think about this is that companies just go through different life cycles. Okay, there are times when quality is very important, and there are times when quantity is very important. The only thing that is strategically important from an engineer's perspective here is that the leaders of the department, engineering, tech, whatever we call it, they need to be held accountable in this domain. So if we have been focusing a lot on quantity instead of quality for quite a long time, and the system is about to explode, the leaders need to stay true to themselves and help the rest of engineering or the rest of the department to sort out how they can give more time to quality. And the same way, as an engineer, people should also hold their bosses accountable to make sure that it's not just over-engineering all of the time. Because building stuff is fun as hell. I know. I love building things, and I love building complicated things. But in reality, always the customer has to be in front of you, and a customer is not going to be happy if nothing new or nothing fresh hits their fingers. So that's the way I think about this today. Specifically at Habyt, I would say that the tech debt at our company is low still. So it's quite low. So we are still, spending a little bit the wealth that we have accumulated over here. We only have this one big-ish legacy sales system that we will need to get rid of, from being a core data point to being a leaf in the dependency graph of our systems.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's good that you guys have a low tech debt as well. I mean, it's quite surprising given the sort of actual circumstances of all the mergers and the different and the size of the tech team as well. Not to ruin your interview process at all, but what are you looking for when you ask that question? Like, how do you make sure what you ship is quality? Like, what are you looking for there?
I'm really so I'm whenever I'm talking to people, I'm always looking for stories. So I'm not necessarily interested in like one-word answers. Do you know how to code TypeScript? Yes, fantastic, you're hired. Like, that is not very exciting for me. For me, from what we discussed on the values as well, Gus, it's really important that that when I sit down in front of this person and I ask them, how do you write good code? Like, they need to be able to explain to me how they write good code, essentially. And a lot of times, it's completely enough for me to tell like, oh yeah, I love to write unit tests, right? I think unit tests are absolutely amazing, and they really help guide my hand when building quality software, because I hate it when there's defect in my functions. Sometimes, people mention extreme programming practices, right? How do you write great code? I collaborate with my team, right? I do a lot of pair programming. I do code reviews. I do this and that. Sometimes people mention here, how they learn about things. They tell me that, oh, I follow this guy on Twitter, and he always tweets about, how to do this cool stuff in TypeScript that makes our type safety more robust. And these are the sort of things that I enjoy talking about during an interview, and that's why I specifically ask about this. And it's very surprising, but sometimes there are people who really cannot explain why they think their code is high quality, and to me that is more disturbing than if someone tells me that I don't like to write tests because I think it's dumb, but I like to do code reviews because I think that's really good. So yeah, I would say that this is what I'm really looking for when I'm chatting with someone about this in an interview.
Yeah, I think it's so important nowadays with all the sort of AI tools and things like this, which actually I wanted to ask you about just next question before we finish the core discussion. Yeah, it's super worrying sometimes when someone has the best code, they're the person to go to, and you're like, how did you do this? And like, I don't know. It's like, come on, you have the it's insane sometimes, especially when they might be following like test-driven development and practices like this, it is worrying. In terms of like that sort of maybe sort of like an anecdotal, something anecdotal you could mention about AI and things. You've obviously said you have a very good background in Python, and is there any, from like a technical perspective, like have you observed in any sort of like system performance or developer productivity or even sort of like hardware or systems maintenance when you're using a modern tech stack, like what sort of advantages do you have, and can you implement AI into this, do you think, right now?
Yeah. AI is a very exciting topic nowadays. At least my Twitter is full of full of that stuff. And so my directive with AI is that today it's really fun to be a developer because of all of the AI stuff that is happening around us. I really encourage my team and my department and a lot of people in the rest of the company as well to start utilizing artificial intelligence in one way or another in their work. In the tech team, a lot of people are using GPT-4 as like a quote unquote assistant or intern, or I don't know what we could call this very nicely, but yeah, because there is so much work that we have and there is so much detail that sometimes we have to go into, it's very useful for the engineers to have like an assistant who they can ask really quickly to give them a draft of some sort of feature, and then they can use that piece of code to later build the details into. So there was another time when, for example, I decided to utilize the large language models for my work. One of our partners that we were integrating with, they did not have open API files to generate clients for us in TypeScript. So what I did is I just asked GPT-4. I copy pasted their tech documentation and I asked GPT-4 to put together an open API file for me from this information, and it saved me days of work of typing and reading docs and stuff like this. So it's very, very, very useful for people to speed up their work. There is one caveat though. AI is very, very immature. I also worked with some of my friends to build out a couple of AI products to test out, how far we can push this tech today. It's still very immature. So if a person who does, I treat it as a tool, right? In the beginning, you need to learn how to operate a drill, right? When you first are handed the drill, you're not going to know how to go forward drilling, how to do backward drilling. You're not going to know, exactly which head is going to fit perfectly for the use case that you need. So you need to learn how to work with the tool. And the new AI models and the new AI systems like GPT-4 or Copilot by GitHub, these things, they are tools. So they need to be learned how to use. And for me, this is what we invest into at Habyt with more junior developers in the department, right? Internally, we have knowledge sharing meetings scheduled for every week. Sometimes we hold it if we have a topic, sometimes we don't. When we have a topic, sometimes it's AI, and then the various team members in the department are demoing how they are using AI to be more efficient in their work. And this is the way that we like to share knowledge around this, because the problem with this is that if you don't know how to use it, it might bite you in the ass really, really quickly. But if you do know how to use it, it can really double your productivity essentially compared to where you were. You can get more work done much faster essentially if you start utilizing these tools.
Yeah, I guess that's a great answer. First of all, I guess it's very similar to what you were saying about the adopting like a modern tech stack, right? Like you've done this to be used as a tool to make your life easier, not to not understand it and get the most out of it. And like all the things you said you were getting from Vercel, like all of those different tools and things you're implementing is great. It's crazy. Thank you very much for the sort of core discussion there. We obviously covered a lot of ground, and I think that's super helpful for both our listeners and for even people on your level as well who are part of these organizations that maybe tech is not as valuable, but it is valued to an extent where it is almost the core of any company, and these issues are very sensitive, and I'm sure that your advice can go a long way to people in that position. Part of the closing questions that I love to do is more of a fun thing. So no AI, no microservices chats, but in terms of you're a tech leader, yeah? You're prioritizing, you're managing a lot of people and also your own time as well. Everyone's day starts differently. Do you have a morning routine that maximizes your productivity?
Yeah, love this question. Yeah, 5 minutes before my meeting, I get out of bed. No, I'm just kidding. So I have a little dog. So the little dog needs to be walked every morning. That keeps me nice and grounded. She's actually right here, asking for some attention. So maybe people can say hi to Jojo.
Beautiful. What's her name?
Jojo.
Jojo, lovely.
Yeah. So she is a big part of my morning routine because of that. I love to drink my coffee before work. That's something that I gotta get into my body before anything very serious happens. And maybe some breakfast in the morning. That usually is a banana. The way I like to organize my work in the morning is that on Notion I maintain a daily work log. This is something I have to deal with a lot of things every single day. A lot of people reach out to me. I receive a lot of emails. I have to respond to them. I have to, do a lot of work as well. Sometimes I need to even go down and code some things. So I love to run a work log for myself every single day. Just write down the stuff that I wanted to do today. check out the things that I actually did. And if there's something that I didn't do that I wanted to do, I just move it up to the next day to make sure that it's on top of my priority list and it gets done ASAP. This practice, I started doing it a couple of months ago. It doesn't just help with being more organized. It also helps with psychological things, like not ending the day in a way that I feel that I did not achieve anything or I didn't do anything because it was just so much and so chaotic and stuff like this. Now, whenever I finish my day, I look at this long list of blue check marks on my Notion, and I really feel like that, there was a lot of things done, and it makes me feel good.
That's awesome. As at this point, I should say that this podcast is sponsored by Notion. That's great though. I like that you have like various like staple things that you sort of just stick to, right? Like walking the dog, having a coffee. Like some people skip these things. How many times do you have to walk the Jojo every day?
Ideally 3, but most of the days we reduce it to 2. But luckily my wife helps with this as well.
Nice. The next question is just sort of like, in terms of yourself as a proven technology leader who's had a lot of experience in the space, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, right? Maybe who wants to become a tech leader or even like an individual contributor, but right now they're not even a software engineer, or maybe they're interviewing this, there's a very touchy space between these AI tools right now that are, the companies that are maybe not receiving funding. Is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? Should I go for a big company? What sort of advice do you give, and why?
That's a very good question. If I were to start today and I would receive my own advice from the future or the past or different reality, Akos, or something like this, I would definitely say that don't try to rush too quickly. I think one of the very tempting things today with all of the tools and all of the tech is that for example, you can pay $10 to GitHub to get Copilot each month. That is going to, move your typing into like a tab-driven development. Essentially, the Copilot just tells you what to type, and then you're just hitting tab because it looks okay. When you're a beginner, this can be like a very tempting thing to do. But the best engineers that I've worked with in my career, they are people who dig down to core issues and core topics. So yeah, if you want to learn, for example, web development, and you want to work with, you want to build websites that are hyper interactive, make sure to learn the basics, the very basics of JavaScript, for example, and get to the core of it and really, really understand it. Learn about algorithms, read a lot of things on the internet. There's so many tools where you can practice today, where you can just refresh your mind. Even I sometimes in the mornings when I know I will have a heavy coding day, I go on to HackerRank at 8:30. I do 1 or 2 challenges to get my brain going, and then I jump into business and I start building things for Habyt. So my best advice would be is that it's a long journey. You need to take your time in order to be good at what you're doing, and or what you want to do, and don't be scared if it's not pretty in the beginning, because coding is very rarely pretty in the beginning. Essentially, in the beginning, it's really boring, and it's really, you're looking at your terminal, feeling like crying, not understanding why it's not compiling, getting syntax errors and stuff like this. But this is just the phase. This is the phase where you learn how to use the drill, right? And once you learn how to use the drill, then you can get an assistant to actually drill for you.
That's great advice. I mean, obviously everything goes at 1,000,000 miles an hour these days as well. So just taking that breath and just calming down, don't rush through, don't try and keep up with everyone. You know, it's great advice. What do you sort of see for the next generation of hires anyway? It's always an interesting question. People have a different sort of, you know, you've hired juniors quite recently, I believe. So what do you see as there positives, negatives from your side?
Interesting question. I think my take is that new generation of engineers, lot of very smart people. To be honest with you, I do see this, that stuff that, you know, for me is like a technological marvel today, because I've been in the industry for quite a long time. You know, for these new generation of engineers, like given. Okay, so it's just there, right? I started coding before Stack Overflow, so you know, like it was a much different world at that point, and you know, learning and getting information. And now, you know, since then the internet completely exploded, essentially, and there are just so many things that are given today that did not exist back in the day. So what I see is that people are exceptionally good at getting tools done and you know, touching things and getting things moving really quickly. And I think that, you know, my advice for this generation, or whatever we call this, because I hope I'm really not that old yet, Gus, is that you know, take your time, essentially. Really take your time, because yeah, what I see today when interviewing younger engineers, for example, is that a lot of times I just see, you know, basic algorithmic stuff missing. And it's not difficult to learn, and it's not difficult to practice. And you don't need to know like deep graph algorithms to be a good web developer. And that should not even be the expectation of the industry in reality. But just because you don't need to know deep graph algorithms for your work, it doesn't mean that you should not know basic algorithms for your work. So this would be the one thing that I noticed, that I think, you know, if you want to be a successful software developer today, get the basics done really well and build everything on top of that with the incredible tools that exist now on the market.
That's cool. I really like what the sort of analogy about Stack Overflow as well. Like I imagine back in the day, it was sort of like going through a desert. Everyone's looking in holes for information, any knowledge, and now it's like a bloody like rainforest. You just pick something off the tree, right?
Gus, I was buying like these how to learn Java in 24 hours type of books when I was in university. That's how I could learn, you know, programming at that point.
Yeah, like
so very
programming for dummies, things like this.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. On the topic of you drinking water, what's your favorite drink in Berlin?
In Berlin, oh my God, I drink so much trash, to be honest with you. But I really like beer. I love German beer. Whenever I have the chance, I always drink good Augustiner. It puts me right to the spot where I need to be, essentially, to have the time. And when I cannot drink, then I usually opt in for a mishmash, which is a mixture of Coke and Fanta, basically.
Oh, interesting. Okay. As a Hungarian, whose beer is better?
Oh, whose beer is Germany? That's not even a question. There is one beer I really miss from Budapest and Hungary, actually, which is a canned IPA. I know it sounds absolutely disgusting, but for whatever reason, I grew very fond of that beer. It's called the Soproni IPA. It's a nice white what is this, box or can of
Can,
beer,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah. And whenever you visit Hungary, I highly recommend having one of those on the bank of the Danube. Then you get like a true, Hungarian worker experience.
Well, that sounds amazing. What about your favorite food in Berlin? What's the favorite food?
Should I advertise the the place? There is
Yeah, for sure.
Japanese curry restaurant called Takenori, where I love eating. Of course, in the hot weather that we have right now, Japanese curry is probably not the most optimal food, but super luckily, Berlin weather is not great always, so I'm always down for a Japanese curry at that place.
And what's that place called? Spell it out.
Takenori, Takenori. There we go. Spelling championship won.
This is just for my personal collection. I'm making a list. What's your favorite country to visit and why?
That's a good one. I think I have a lot of countries where I like traveling to. Obviously, I like going to Hungary because I have a lot of friends and family there still. My wife is Ukrainian, so when things are good there, then I also love visiting that country because it's absolutely beautiful, and Kiev is an amazing city. In Europe, I also really like to go to Amsterdam. That city is just a ton of fun in my eyes, and I have a lot of great memories from there. And maybe 3 cities is enough when you say one favorite city. So yeah.
And we also touched on this at the start of the questions in this section, but like, what's your sort of best advice for balancing like family? Obviously, you have a wife and a lovely dog, and work. How do you balance between the two things? Any advice?
Yeah. Be transparent. Communicate a lot. Make sure that if you have a lot of stuff to do at work, then everyone knows about this at home. Make sure that when you have a lot of time for the family, then you invest that time properly. Close the laptop at the agreed time. It's very, very healthy thing to do. And these are the best things that I can give as advice today.
No, it's very, very similar to your advice on, what you value, right? Communication, respect. Very good. And the final question, actually not the final one, the penultimate one. What are your top 3 book recommendations for tech knowledge? And you can't include your own book on microservices.
I would not recommend my own book. I mean, if someone wants to read it, I think it's a pretty good read and a pretty good primer.
Should we plug your book on where can people find a copy?
I think it's available on Amazon today. The book is called Designing Microservices with Django. It's written by me, Akos Hochrein. It's a nice light read. It's an easy read for both people who want to build these systems and for both people who are designing systems like this or wanting to decide to move to microservices. The book has a pretty detailed guide on strategies on how you can get this done essentially in a human way rather than the insanity that these migrations usually draw with themselves. And the book also talks a lot about how to design microservices in general, so you don't go down into the route that you create 2 massive monoliths, essentially. If anyone's interested in reading this, I'm very happy for that, and I hope you enjoy. And if not, there's still a lot of stuff on the internet that you can read about this, because I think it's a very exciting topic to explore. And going back to your question, Gus, just please give me 1 second because I need to pull my Goodreads reading list for this. Maybe I will share this with you as well because I have an entire list for management books
nice.
People can check out if they are interested in this sort of things.
Yeah, we'll put that in the comments.
So the first book that I highly recommend that I know from top of my head is Radical Candor. Which is an engineering management book. but I highly recommend it to people who are leading different teams as well. It really highlights the interesting parts in how we are working with people, how we can do best practices when it comes to performance management, when it comes to working with different teams, when it comes to optimizing work, and in general just dealing with people, which is primarily the job that we have over here. So I think Kim Scott, she did an absolutely fantastic job with this book, and I really highly recommend it to every leader who is remotely interested in how to run efficient teams. Maybe another one which is which was huge impact for me was the Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu. And this book, it comes from a different perspective because she was one of the first design managers at Facebook. So it's not an engineering focused book, but it's very, very focused on how to work in a product organization. Ultimately, most engineering teams today in tech are working in product organizations and not strictly engineering organizations. And this book helps a lot with understanding, how managers in product organizations are building systems and understanding how to work together efficiently. So if someone is in a situation like this, highly recommend taking a look at this book. And let me pick another one, maybe a bit more techie book, since I like to read those as well. Yeah, okay. I will go with a very simple one that sparks a lot of controversy, which is Clean Code by Robert Martin. This is a very controversial book because it's very old. I mean, relatively old, let's say, because tech moves really quickly, of course. But in my eyes, so the debate is always, the details of the book. And this book is really about how to build code that you don't build for yourself, but you build for your teammates. And I think this is what this book is really good at, how to build empathy towards other engineers in your team, that you don't just put together stuff that is hard to read, that is hard to work with in the future, that is difficult to maintain, but really what are some incredibly basic practices that you can follow to give your peers the present of code that is workable.
Nice. Some really good recommendations there, and also some reasons as well. So that's great. And what we'll do is we'll leave a link in a comment when we post like maybe a clip or something like this onto LinkedIn with how to design microservices with Django as well. So that would be great. The final question: any feedback on this podcast? Like, how did you think it went?
I think it was super fun, Gus. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's really cool that there's this opportunity to talk a little bit about the company, to talk a little bit about technology in general, to give the new generation of engineers a bit of guidance on how they can be even more successful than they are today. So I've had a blast here, and the conversation was really engaging and exciting for me. Thank you.
Nice, man. Thanks so much. I think it's been really awesome, actually. We've covered a load of topics. I mean, we could even probably record another podcast tomorrow with completely different focus. So yeah, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the way you really lay out things and really unwrap the answers that you've been given today. I really appreciate how you've answered those and your time today. So yeah,
I will give her your regards.
Cheers, and we'll speak very soon, Akos. Have a great evening.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks for joining us today on my third episode of our podcast, Source Talks, the Tech Lab. I'd like to thank Akos for joining us. It's been really intriguing hearing about your journey so far, learning some of the challenges that you're facing at the moment, your core values, and discussing Habyt in detail. We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast. You can listen on all major streaming platforms, Spotify, YouTube. The best place to find us is on LinkedIn at Source Technology, or at our website www.sourcegroupinternational.com/source-technology. If you are interested in joining our community, sharing your insights, kind of stories from different business contexts, please reach out to me. We will book in a call and you can join our growing community of technology leaders. We can't wait to share more conversations like this with you so you can take yourself to the next level. Thank you so much for joining in. I will see you next time. We've got episodes booked up until October, so really, really good content to film coming up and to stay in touch with. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.